Catherine Zeta-Jones has lived two lives at once. To the world, she is timeless elegance made flesh. A woman who seemed to glide through Hollywood untouched by time, scandal, or weakness. Red carpets bent toward her. Cameras adored her. From Chicago to Zorro, she embodied control, power, and a beauty so precise it felt unbreakable. But behind that perfection, another story was unfolding quietly. A story that began not with applause, but with a child fighting for breath. A life shaped by scars long before the spotlight ever found her. A woman who learned early that survival sometimes comes at the cost of silence. At 56, Catherine Zeta-Jones is not battling fame. She is battling something far more ruthless: invisible illness, emotional collapse hidden behind discipline, a marriage tested by cancer, addiction, prison, and public humiliation, a mind that turned against itself while the world kept asking her to smile. The woman the world crowned as Hollywood royalty has spent decades fighting wars no one could see. So what really happened behind the glamour? What did Catherine Zeta-Jones endure to remain standing? And what price did she pay to survive a life that looked perfect from the outside? Before we go deeper, take a moment to leave a like as a quiet tribute to a woman who survived battles most of us will never see. Long before the world ever knew the name Catherine Zeta-Jones, before the red carpets, the Oscar gold, and the carefully sculpted image of timeless elegance, her very first fight for survival happened in silence, far away from any spotlight. There is a faint scar just beneath her chin. It is almost invisible now, softened by time, makeup, and decades of practiced composure. But that scar carries the weight of a moment when her life nearly ended before it truly began. As a toddler in Swansea, Wales, Catherine was struck by a severe viral infection that robbed her lungs of air. Her breathing became shallow, frantic, terrifying. Doctors rushed her into emergency surgery and performed a tracheotomy to save her life. She survived. But survival came marked not just on her skin, but somewhere deeper, in the architecture of her spirit. That scar became her first quiet lesson. Life could be taken without warning. Breath itself was not guaranteed. Long before she learned choreography or memorized lines, Catherine learned endurance. She was born on September 25, 1969, into a modest working-class family in Swansea. Her father ran a small bakery, waking before dawn to knead dough and open shop. Her mother worked tirelessly as a seamstress, stitching garments with precision and patience. There was no glamour in their life, no privilege, no safety net beyond effort and discipline. What they did have was belief. And when they saw something extraordinary stirring inside their daughter, they chose to protect it, even when it required sacrifice. Catherine was not a quiet child. She moved constantly, danced instinctively, sang without hesitation. Her living room became her first stage. The narrow streets of Swansea became corridors she crossed with purpose. By the age of 4, she was performing in local church halls. By 11, she was cast in stage productions like Annie. Applause arrived early in her life, but so did pressure. Each performance demanded perfection. Each success raised the stakes. Then came the moment that changed everything. Against impossible odds, her family won a substantial national lottery prize. For most families, it would have meant comfort or indulgence. For the Zeta-Jones household, it meant investment. They bought a small pastry shop. They moved to a better neighborhood. And they poured resources into Catherine's training. Dance lessons, voice coaching, stage discipline. Her father would later say that she had fire from the beginning. They simply gave it oxygen. By 13, Catherine was performing on the West End in Bugsy Malone. At an age when most children are still discovering who they are, she was already being shaped by adult expectations. Rehearsals replaced play. Commutes replaced friendships. Mistakes became unacceptable. Childhood quietly slipped away, not in tragedy, but in transaction. Talent in exchange for innocence. At 14, she auditioned for the national tour of the Pajama Game. She didn't just earn a role, she dominated the room. Directed by Mickey Dolenz, the production demanded professionalism far beyond her years. And then, at 15, she made a decision that would define her life. She left school entirely to pursue acting full-time. It was not rebellion, it was survival by another name. Catherine would later admit that there was no safety net, no alternative future. Acting was not a dream. It was the only path she could see. While other teenagers wrote diaries and planned weekends, she navigated contracts, critics, and rooms full of adults whose approval could determine her future. Inside, fear never left her. She learned to hide it well. She learned to smile through exhaustion. She learned to keep going even when doubt crept in late at night. And beneath it all, that scar remained. A reminder that her life had already asked her to fight once. And she had survived. By the time she stepped toward adulthood, Catherine Zeta-Jones was already seasoned by loss, discipline, and pressure. She did not arrive in the world of performance naive or protected. She arrived sharpened, controlled, and quietly carrying the understanding that if she ever stopped moving forward, everything could be taken away. This was not the beginning of a fairy tale. It was the forging of armor. When Catherine stepped out of her teenage years and into adulthood, she did not enter a world eager to welcome her. The discipline of the West End had trained her body and voice, but it had not prepared her for the indifference of the film industry. Her first true step toward cinema came in 1990 with a role in the French production 1001 Nights. On paper, it looked like a dream debut, an international film, a poetic concept, a chance to transition from stage to screen. In reality, it became a quiet humiliation. The film failed catastrophically. Critics ignored it. Audiences stayed away. Ticket sales were so low that the box office numbers barely registered. For a young actress who had risked everything, the message was brutal. Talent alone was not enough. Catherine returned to Britain bruised but not broken, carrying a familiar feeling she had known since childhood. Survival meant adaptation. Back home, she rebuilt patiently. Television became her refuge, not because it was glamorous, but because it offered stability. In 1991, she was cast as Mariette in The Darling Buds of May. The role changed her life. British audiences fell in love with her warmth, her natural confidence, and her unforced charm. For the first time, Catherine felt seen not as a prodigy or a novelty, but as a woman who could carry a story. The show ran for 2 years and turned her into a household name across the United Kingdom. Yet success in one country does not guarantee respect in another. When Catherine crossed the Atlantic to pursue Hollywood, she quickly discovered how small her achievements looked from the other side. Casting rooms were polite but cold. She was told she was beautiful, but not memorable, talented, but not proven. Her accent was considered a barrier. Her television fame meant little. She accepted role after role, hoping one might unlock the door. Films like Splitting Heirs, Christopher Columbus, The Discovery, and The Phantom passed through theaters without leaving a mark. Each project promised momentum and delivered disappointment. Catherine later admitted that this was the first time in her life where effort did not guarantee progress. She began to question herself, not her discipline, but her worth. The doubt crept in quietly and stayed longer than she expected. Then fate intervened in the most understated way. A performance caught the attention of Steven Spielberg. Some say it was her work in the young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Others point to the television epic Titanic from 1996. What mattered was not which role it was, but that someone powerful finally paused long enough to look at her closely. One phone call changed everything. That attention led directly to the opportunity that would define her career. In 1998, Catherine was cast as Elena Montero in The Mask of Zorro. The role was not gifted, it was contested. She faced competition from actresses already known to American audiences. To secure it, she trained relentlessly. Sword fighting, horseback riding, accent refinement, physical endurance. She refused to be ornamental. She wanted to be formidable. On screen, the result was undeniable. She did not merely match her co-stars, she commanded the frame. Critics noticed, audiences remembered. The film became a global success, earning hundreds of millions worldwide. Overnight, Catherine Zeta-Jones was no longer an outsider knocking on Hollywood's door. She had arrived, but arrival came with its own cost. Fame magnified everything. Expectations, scrutiny, pressure. Catherine pushed forward without pause. In 1999, she starred in Entrapment, delivering one of the most iconic images of modern cinema. Then came Traffic in 2000, where she shed glamour entirely and revealed depth that critics had underestimated. Awards followed. Respect followed. Momentum became unstoppable. The pinnacle arrived in 2002 with Chicago. Pregnant, exhausted, and under relentless pressure, Catherine delivered a performance that fused discipline and desire into something unforgettable. When she stood on the Oscar stage and accepted the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, she was carrying more than a child. She was carrying every rejection, every doubt, every moment she had almost believed she did not belong. From Swansea to Hollywood, the rise was not fast, and it was never easy. It was earned inch by inch through persistence, restraint, and a refusal to disappear. And yet, just as the world crowned her, another battle was already forming behind the curtain. At the very moment Catherine Zeta-Jones appeared to have everything Hollywood could offer, something inside her began to fracture. Success did not arrive as relief. It arrived as pressure. Fame magnified her life until there was nowhere left to hide. Every appearance was scrutinized. Every role was compared. Every pause was questioned. The discipline that once protected her now became a cage she could not step out of. After Chicago, Catherine did not slow down. She believed momentum was something you either held on to or lost forever. Projects followed in quick succession. Public appearances multiplied. Interviews became obligations rather than conversations. At the same time, she was navigating early motherhood, learning how to divide herself between a demanding industry and a child who needed presence, not perfection. The balance was impossible, but she refused to admit it. Behind closed doors, her emotional state began to swing unpredictably. There were stretches of energy where she felt unstoppable, followed by long, crushing lows that left her unable to function. She would wake up exhausted after sleeping for hours. Some days, getting dressed felt heavier than performing on stage ever had. Still, she smiled. Still, she showed up. That was the pattern she had learned as a child. Endure quietly. Do not complain. Do not stop. Her marriage only intensified the strain. Being married to Michael Douglas placed her under a different kind of spotlight. She was no longer judged solely as an actress, but as a wife, a younger partner, and a public symbol. Headlines speculated constantly. Some questioned her motives. Others doubted the longevity of the relationship. Catherine absorbed it all without response, but the noise chipped away at her sense of self. Then came the series of blows that would push her past endurance. Michael's family was shaken when his son Cameron was arrested and later sentenced to prison. The weight of that crisis did not stay contained. It followed them home, into conversations, into the emotional atmosphere of the household. Catherine found herself supporting a husband who was unraveling while quietly unraveling herself. In 2010, the ground collapsed entirely. Michael Douglas was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. Overnight, Catherine shifted from wife to caregiver. Hospital rooms replaced red carpets. Chemotherapy schedules replaced film calls. She watched the man she loved weaken day by day, unsure if survival was even possible. Fear became constant. Sleep disappeared. Anxiety tightened its grip. The media did not pause out of respect. When Michael publicly discussed the possible cause of his cancer, the story exploded into something cruel and invasive. Catherine was dragged into speculation she never invited. Her privacy was dismantled in public view. For someone already emotionally fragile, the humiliation cut deeply. By then, the symptoms she had been fighting in silence were no longer manageable. The mood swings, the exhaustion, the despair were not temporary. They were clinical. Catherine was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder, a condition defined by severe depressive episodes and hypomania that often goes unnoticed until it becomes overwhelming. For a long time, she said nothing. The stigma terrified her more than the illness itself. She feared being labeled unstable. She feared losing roles. She feared becoming a headline rather than a human being. So she kept going until she could not. In 2011, she made a decision that would quietly redefine her strength. She checked herself into a mental health facility. When the news became public, Catherine chose honesty over silence. She spoke openly about her diagnosis, not with drama, but with clarity. She explained that mental illness is not a weakness, but a condition that demands care. That one sentence shattered an illusion Hollywood had protected for decades. The illusion that strength means never breaking. But speaking did not erase the pain. The illness did not vanish. Treatment was slow. Recovery was uneven. And while Catherine worked to stabilize herself, her marriage reached another breaking point. In 2013, she and Michael separated quietly. No accusations, no spectacle. Just distance born from exhaustion. Those months apart were among the darkest of her life. Away from the spotlight, Catherine faced herself without distraction. She questioned her choices, her identity, and whether the life she had built was sustainable. There were no scripts to follow, no applause to guide her, only silence and reflection. What happened next did not make headlines, but it mattered more than any award. After time, therapy, and brutal honesty, Catherine and Michael chose to reunite. Not because it was easy, but because walking away would have been easier. Staying required courage neither of them had expected to need. The downfall did not destroy her career, but it reshaped her entirely. Catherine emerged slower, quieter, and more deliberate. She no longer chased validation. She chose survival. And yet, even after standing back up, the most painful confrontation was still ahead. If Catherine Zeta-Jones's earlier struggles were storms she could brace against, what came next was an earthquake that split the ground beneath her feet. Because just as she was learning how to live with her illness, life demanded more from her than she had ever imagined giving. Michael Douglas survived cancer, but survival came at a cost neither of them could fully measure. Treatment saved his life, yet it altered him. His energy, his confidence, even his sense of identity shifted. Catherine watched the man who once felt unbreakable confront mortality in ways that left scars no camera could capture. She stood beside him through every hospital visit, every recovery setback, every night when fear returned uninvited. At the same time, Catherine was trying to rebuild herself. Bipolar II disorder does not announce when it will return. It waits. Some days she felt clear and grounded. Other days, the weight pressed down without warning. She learned to recognize the signs, the creeping fatigue, the emotional fog, the sudden urge to withdraw. Medication helped, but it did not erase the reality that her mind could turn against her without permission. Then the public narrative shifted again. Instead of celebrating survival, headlines began to question stability. Was she fragile? Was the marriage failing? Was her career fading? Catherine felt herself reduced to speculation rather than understood as a person who had endured years of compounded trauma. The same industry that applauded her strength now watched closely for signs of collapse. The separation from Michael became the emotional climax of everything she had been carrying. It was not fueled by betrayal or lack of love. It was exhaustion. Two people wounded in different ways trying to breathe in the same space. Catherine later described it as reaching a point where continuing without pause would have meant losing herself completely. During that period, she stepped away from acting more than she ever had before. Not as a strategy, but as survival. Silence became necessary. Routine became safety. She focused on her children, on therapy, on learning how to exist without constantly performing competence. There were no grand revelations. Healing came in small, unremarkable moments. Waking up without dread, eating without nausea, sleeping through the night. The true tragedy was not public. It was internal. Catherine had to mourn the version of herself she could no longer be. The woman who could push endlessly. The performer who never slowed. The image that Hollywood had projected onto her. Letting go of that identity felt like loss, even though it was necessary. Reuniting with Michael did not magically fix anything. It was a choice made with full awareness of damage already done. They returned to each other older, quieter, stripped of illusion. Love was no longer romanticized. It became practical, patient, and fragile. Staying together required rebuilding trust, not just between them, but within themselves. By the time Catherine stepped back into public view, she was changed. The glamour was still there, but it no longer defined her. Her eyes carried something heavier than ambition. They carried memory. The applause mattered less. Survival mattered more. This was the true climax of her story. Not an award, not a comeback role, but the moment she chose to remain present in a life that had repeatedly tried to pull her apart. And from that choice, a different kind of legacy began to form. By the time Catherine Zeta-Jones entered this later chapter of her life, she no longer measured success the way Hollywood once taught her to. Awards still mattered, but they no longer defined her worth. Beauty remained, but it was no longer armor. Fame followed her, but she no longer chased it. What mattered now was balance, something she had spent decades trying to understand. Catherine learned that legacy is not built in moments of triumph alone, but in how a person survives what nearly destroys them. Living with bipolar II disorder reshaped how she viewed time, energy, and ambition. She became deliberate, selective. Roles were chosen carefully, not for visibility, but for meaning. Long breaks between projects were no longer signs of retreat, but acts of self-preservation. Her return to the screen in later years carried a different weight. Performances were quieter, more contained, shaped by lived experience rather than technical perfection. Audiences sensed it immediately. There was depth behind the elegance, stillness behind the fire. Catherine no longer needed to dominate a frame to command attention. She inhabited it with restraint, something only survival can teach. Beyond film, she built something more lasting. Through advocacy and openness, she helped reshape how mental health was discussed in entertainment. By naming her condition publicly, she dismantled the illusion that strength means silence. Letters poured in from people who had lived in shame for years, seeing themselves reflected in her honesty. In that sense, her most powerful role was not scripted. It was lived. Family became the anchor of everything. Motherhood grounded her in ways success never could. With her children grown, Catherine transitioned into a quieter rhythm of guidance rather than protection. She spoke openly about learning to let go, to trust the foundation she had built in them, even as she continued managing her own vulnerabilities. Her marriage, once dissected endlessly by the media, evolved into something deeply private. Love became less about intensity and more about steadiness. Two people choosing to remain, even when remaining was difficult. That choice, repeated quietly over years, became its own form of courage. Today, Catherine Zeta-Jones stands not as a symbol of flawless glamour, but as proof that endurance can coexist with elegance. She did not escape pain. She learned how to live alongside it. Her story does not promise healing without struggle, or success without cost. It offers something more honest: survival without apology. In the end, her legacy is not defined by red carpets or box office numbers. It lives in the permission she gave others to speak, to pause, to ask for help, to continue even when the path forward feels uncertain. Catherine Zeta-Jones did not simply survive the storm. She learned how to walk through it with grace, and in doing so, showed others that they could too. At 56, Catherine Zeta-Jones no longer stands before the world as an untouchable symbol of perfection, but as a woman who has survived herself. Behind the red carpets, the awards, and the timeless elegance is someone who has learned how to keep breathing through pain that never truly disappears. The scars did not vanish with success. They simply became quieter, deeper, and woven into who she is today. Catherine did not conquer her darkness. She accepted it. She did not erase the storms that shaped her. She learned how to walk forward while carrying them. And that is what makes her story linger long after the screen fades to black. Not the fame, not the beauty, but the quiet courage of choosing to live fully even when living hurts. If Catherine Zeta-Jones's journey moved you, leave a comment below as a tribute to those who fight their hardest battles in silence. And if you want to keep discovering the hidden truths behind Hollywood legends, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the stories that fame never tells.